I want to be clear about one thing before I tell you the rest of it. I did not set out to raise a war beast. I set out to not kill a kitten. That's the whole decision, really. Everything after it was just consequences. I was quartermaster on the Holdfast, a refugee freighter running the long loop between the border worlds, the kind of ship that carries people who don't have anywhere else to be carried to. We took on cargo nobody else would touch, and sometimes that cargo had heartbeats. A litter of embercats had been born in the hold 3 weeks out from dock. Nobody's fault. Just biology doing what biology does when you stack breeding stock too close to refugee bunks. Four of them were already gone by the time it came to me. The fifth one was smaller than my hand, ash-black fur with faint orange seams along its ribs like a fire somebody'd banked down for the night. And it looked up at me instead of cowering into the corner of the crate the way the others had. Just looked. Steady, unblinking, the way you look at something you've already decided about. I told the culling officer the fifth one died on the way down. I put it in an empty feed sack, walked it 3 decks below the manifest line, and built it a nest out of insulation foam behind the coolant pump housing, where the heat signature would read as engine noise. I named it Soot because I am not a creative man, and it slept against my collarbone that first month like it had always lived there. Feeding it was the hard part, those first weeks. The galley rationed protein tight enough that a man noticed if you took extra, so I traded my own portions down to broth and gave the meat to a feed sack behind a coolant pump, and told anyone who asked that I'd lost my appetite from the cull. Nobody asked twice. People on a refugee ship learn early not to ask a man too many questions about what he does alone after lights out. Too many of them have their own version of the same secret, just shaped like a person instead of an animal. I'd go down after my shift, sit against the housing with my knees up, and Soot would climb into the space between my arm and my ribs, and go still in a way that felt less like sleep and more like trust, deciding to settle somewhere. I've put down sick livestock before without losing sleep. I did it because the thing looked at me like it already knew I wasn't going to be the kind of man who let it die quiet in a sack, and it turned out it was right, and I didn't see much use arguing with an animal that had better judgment about my own character than I did. Years went by, the way years do on a long-loop freighter, slow in the day-to-day, sudden when you look back at them. Soot grew past secret, grew past manageable. Grew past every story I had ready, in case someone asked why there were claw marks on the cargo netting. By the 3rd year, he was the size of a hull loader. By the 5th, he could put his head through the galley hatch and still have shoulder room. I stopped hiding him and started just not advertising him, which on a ship full of people running from worse things than an off-the-books predator turned out to be easier than you'd think. The refugees didn't report him. Half of them had learned the hard way what it cost to report things to authorities, and the other half had watched him fall asleep with his head in a 6-year-old's lap and decided that was evidence enough. He worked the cargo runs with me, hauled what the loaders couldn't, stood watch at the ramp when we docked somewhere that made my neck itch. He never hunted anything bigger than the rats that got into the grain stores, never showed teeth to a soul aboard that ship. I used to tell people, when I had to explain him at all, that he was housebroken. That always got a laugh. It was also, near as I could tell, true. There was a winter run, 4th year, maybe 5th, where the heating coils failed 2 decks down, and we had 40 refugees packed into the mess hall, waiting on a repair crew that wasn't going to make it before the cold did real damage to the youngest of them. Soot lay down in the middle of that floor without anybody asking, and 40 strangers who'd feared him an hour before spent the night packed against an Embercub the size of a hull loader because he ran warmer than any blanket we had. By morning the children were sleeping in his fur like it was ordinary. Nobody called him a secret again after that, though nobody called him anything official either. He'd just become part of how the holdfast worked. Then we docked at Escher Crossing, a border checkpoint with too many flags and not enough law, and Taro Vey came aboard with a Rit and an Alpha. I'd heard of Vey. Everyone on the long loop had. He ran reclamation for one of the breeding syndicates, found unlicensed predators wherever they'd gone to ground, and either repossessed them or put them down, whichever paid better that week. He had his own beast with him, a war-bred Alpha twice the size of anything natural, scarred along one flank, the kind of animal bred specifically to make other animals back down before a fight started. I'd seen pictures of that breed. I'd never stood downwind of one. "Manifest says you're running clean," Vey said, looking past me at the open cargo hold, like he already knew that wasn't true. "Word at the last 3 ports says otherwise." "Word at the last 3 ports is wrong," I said, because there wasn't much else to say, and because I am, on principle, not a man who panics on his own ship. He didn't believe me. He had no reason to. He gave a short word to his Alpha. I don't know the command, something clipped and final, and the beast went into the hold, the way trained things go into a job they've done 100 times before. Soot was at the back of the hold, curled around a stack of grain crates, half asleep the way he got in the afternoon heat off the engines. I watched the Alpha cross the deck toward him, with its head low and its hackles up. Every line of it built for exactly this. And I felt the particular kind of cold you feel when you understand a thing is about to happen and you are too far away to stop it. It didn't happen. The Alpha got within 6 feet of Soot and stopped like it had walked into a wall nobody could see. Its hackles came down. Its head came down further than that. All the way down, jaw near the deck plating, the posture you give to something you've decided outranks you and always did. Soot opened his eyes, looked at the Alpha the way he'd once looked up at me out of a feed sack, and stood, slow, unhurried. He didn't snarl. He didn't need to. He was a full head taller than the Alpha now, ember markings glowing faint along his ribs in the hold's low light, and he simply walked forward and put himself between that animal and me, and waited. The Alpha didn't move again. Vey's voice cracked out a second command, harder this time, and the Alpha, bred for 3 generations to obey exactly that voice, pressed itself flatter to the deck instead. It wasn't disobedience. I've thought about it a long time since, and I don't think that's the right word. It looked more like the Alpha had just remembered something about the order of things that its training had let it forget, and it wasn't going to unremember it twice. Vey stood in the hatchway with a Rit in his hand that suddenly meant nothing, in front of a beast that wouldn't take a third order, in front of his own crew, who'd come down to watch a routine reclamation, and were instead watching their reclaimers animal cower at the feet of a freighter's stowaway. Nobody on that dock said a word. They didn't have to. I've seen men lose an argument. I'd never seen one lose it in total silence before. Watched it happen on his own animal's face instead of his. He's not licensed, Vay said finally, because it was the only true thing left in his hand. He's not yours either, I said. Never was. You culled him for being small once. I'd think real careful before you try to collect on being wrong twice. Vay looked at Soot a while longer. Whatever calculation he was running, it came out the same way it had to. He called his alpha off the deck. It went without being told twice, which I noticed, and so did he, and he left the writ folded in his coat and walked back up the ramp without it. We sailed on the evening tide. Soot still sleeps in the cargo hold, mostly, though some nights he still puts his head through the galley hatch out of habit, the way he did when he was small enough to fit through it without trying. The refugee kids climb on him like furniture. The new culling officers, when we take one on, get told exactly one rule about the holdfast before they start work, and it isn't written down anywhere official. Whatever's breathing in the hold stays breathing until the quartermaster says different. I didn't raise him to be anything. I just couldn't make myself hand a kitten over to die quiet in a sack, and he remembered that longer and better than I ever expected an animal to remember anything. That's the whole story. I've never needed a better one.